Welcome back to part 2 of Uncle Fezzy fried his kiln. I was going to go into a long diatribe about lamp working and blah 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 blah. I still might. It's in the can. I might put it up. I might not. But I'm going to skip that because my analytics prove that your attention span's about 4 minutes before you turn the video off. I want to try to sucker you in for a little bit more than 4 minutes. So, in 2001, when I purchased this kiln, lamp working wasn't as popular as it is nowadays. And there wasn't a whole lot of manufacturers that made true lamp working annealing ovens. A lot of the companies, Genken being one of them, they were a kiln manufacturer, not an annealing oven manufacturer. They've changed the way they do things a little bit. They've changed a couple of their designs. One of the design changes was to this particular kiln. The new design on this kiln actually has a cloth door that goes in front of this opening here. When I'm working, I am in and out of this little slit here, this little slot on the side of this kiln all day long, which is fine. Part of the problem is this is an open door, okay? So it's inefficient, to say the least. It's slightly dangerous, but you know, I like to live dangerously. And a lot of heat comes out of it, and that's wasted energy. It overtaxes the kiln for no reason. It creates a non-happy glass environment. So my game plan for today is I'm going to take some of this fiberglass cloth that I discussed in my other video, and I'm going to make a cloth door for this kiln. So let's get to it. I'm not going to get all philosophical. I'm just going to show what I'm going to do. And if you watched any of my other videos, you know I'm a pretty eclectic guy. I like to consider myself a bit of a Renaissance man. So I'm going to get all my tools out today and make a door for this thing. If you watched any of my other videos, you know that this is one of my prized possessions. This is my Sailrite sewing machine in its fancy box. If you buy a Sailrite, I highly suggest getting the box with it because this thing weighs about 1,000,000 pounds. And it's backwards. So this is my Sailrite SZ1 or LZ1 sewing machine. And we're going to use this sewing machine to sew this fiberglass into a usable door for my kiln. So I might use this stuff. I might actually use this. So this whole project is kind of like a seat of the pants kind of deal I'm doing here. So I think actually that's what I'm going to use. This already has so the problem I have, and I just showed it, is this stuff frays. It's fraying all over the place. It's kind of a mess. I don't have the proper fiberglass thread for this. So, what I'm going to end up having to do here is the thread that I'm using is a really high quality thread that will take some heat. It won't take the heat of a kiln. But the kiln doesn't get super duper hot on the outside. It shouldn't be an issue. And I plan on using some metal to kind of hold the whole thing together. Alright, so let's set the sewing machine up. I want to move the camera because this is going to be a multifaceted video here. Yeah. I have a bit of an affection for the black arts. And one of the black arts is fiberglass repair. It's kind of a joke, but the truth of the matter is, when you work in the body shop business, nobody wants to do composite work. Nobody wants to work with fiberglass. You'll get some crazy nut like me that'll do it. Fiberglass can be itchy, it's dangerous to breathe the dust, it's kind of, they don't know, no matter how good you repair a piece of fiberglass, it's never the same as it was when it came out of the mold, blah, blah, blah. And one of the side effects of me being into the black arts is I've got a whole ton of material floating around here. Now, I was originally going to use this stuff, which is what I am using in the bottom of the kiln. The problem with this stuff is I have to do a lot of sewing with this. So in a couple of my other videos, I do a good bit of sewing in my videos. I do a good bit of sewing. And one of the things that you have to be mindful of when sewing is fraying edges. Fiberglass loves to fray. Now I have this tape here that has already been serged. The edges are closed in and serged, so they won't pull out. Okay? So, but this is not serged. So this is a cut edge, and the fiberglass fiber actually just peels right out of it. That's a problem. So I do need to sew a little bit. I'm going to be sewing a lot less than I thought I was going to have to. I literally didn't even realize I had this stuff until about 30 seconds ago. When I was pawing through my West Marine bag here, I came across this tape. They call this tape. So the first thing I need to do is measure my hole, which is about 11 inches. It's actually 9 inches. So I'm going to use, this is the brick that for decades for 20 years I've been sticking in that hole, one of the two. This is the one I haven't dropped and broke, but today's still early. So this is the piece, this is the minimum size that I need for this project. That is 9 inches long. I'm going to make the flap 12 inches long because the kiln itself isn't square. The kiln, even though it looks square, it's actually kind of got round edges. That's also why this hinge ain't gonna fly. We're not gonna use the hinge because unless I cut the hinge into multiple pieces, these hinges, once they get bent, they don't like to bend a hole. They don't like to smoothly bend. So we're gonna do something different. At least I think so. Now, the first thing I need to do is actually set my sewing machine up, and I'm not going to do that right now, is I'm going to measure out the cloth here. I'm going to actually not use this ruler. This ruler is 18 inches. I'm going to use a 12-inch ruler because my flap is going to be 12 inches. Just so happens I have a 12-inch steel ruler right here. So I'm going to do that. Now, the kind of a little bit of a bummer here with this project is I don't actually have this tape is just a little too narrow to do a full half. So this is 6 inches. The door's about 2.5. It's just not going to fly. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So the door, that brick is actually 2 inches. Figure 2.5. If I fold this in half completely, I don't think it's going to work the way I want it to. So I am going to have to do a little bit of sewing here on the edge to keep the flap together. I want it pretty beefy. Fiberglass is actually pretty heavy as a cloth. The fiberglass material is heavy. That's part of why I'm using my. That's part of why I'm using my Sailrite to do this and not my my Bernina. my Burnett. That and the Bernina is buried in the basement. It's buried under a pile of stuff, and I don't feel like pulling it out. The Bernina would sew this without much problem, with the exception of the Bernina doesn't like to run this real thick thread. Why have a walking foot machine if you don't use it? So I'm going to fold this out until I get a pretty heavy, until this is pretty heavy. Now I've seen other manufacturers, actually GenCan, they use a different type of fiber cloth. They use a different type of material for their door. I'm using fiberglass because that's what I got on hand. This whole project is something that I have to do with the least amount of expenditure as possible. Yeah, that's just it. I mean, I can only piss away so much money on these projects and not, that's pretty heavy, and not go broke. You know, the idea of me doing this is to make money, not fucking lose money. And quite frankly, I've been losing money lately. Okay, so this is going to be, this is a pretty heavy hunk. This is going to be my door. Yeah, that's going to be my door. So let's cut this off. Ironically, I'm going to unfold this and refold it because I'm not real crazy about the way it worked. Another thing with fiberglass, especially, is it's really slick. It's really slick. It's really slippery. It's like, I'm going to date myself here because I am old. It's like putting satin sheets on a waterbed. If you've ever, that's how old I am, kids. There was a time when satin seats and silk boxers were a real popular thing. All right, so I'm going to fold that back in like that. I'm going to cover that edge, but it looks like, yeah, darn it. Yeah, I'm going to have to unfold it. When I first started doing the fold here, I hadn't taken into account a couple things. You want your seams to line up, or else when I don't want to put a whole lot of thread in this if I don't have to. I'm going to sew over it probably 5 or 6 times. Yeah, so I'm not actually at 12 inches. It's impossible to see on camera there, I know, but I'm not actually at 12 inches on that. So I want to do that. Okay, so that gives me 12 inches. So that gives me almost exactly 12 inches. I'm going to kiss a little bit up to the sewing gods here. The door does not need to be 12 inches. I'm making it 12 inches. The door only needs to be 9 inches. But because it's going to be a flappy, it's going to be a flap, I want to have as much excess. I really like these clips. These are called magic clips. I get them at the sewing supply house. They're great for doing what I'm doing right now. And I also just had a bit of an epiphany while I was out taking a leak. You could probably do this project with a stapler. If you were so inclined, this actually might be better to staple this together. I'm not going to staple it because I would rather sew it. yeah, I would rather just sew it because, well, not for nothing, I have a very expensive sewing machine. But good stainless steel staples would probably do exactly what I'm doing here. And probably maybe even do it just a little bit better. But I'm not going to admit that, because I already said I'm going to sew it. And I don't have any stainless steel staples. You know, I'm trying to be as careful as I can while I'm folding this up. I want it to stay straight, and I don't want it to slide around. This fiberglass is really, really, really slippery. You know, boxer shorts on silk sheets. Okay. But I also want it to be really heavy. So there's so I have to get a lot of layers here. I have to get a lot of layers, and like I said, I want them to stay as straight as I possibly can get them. Zoom that in a little bit. I get a wacky camera angle going on here. There we go. Everything is cold in here. I shut my heater off because it interferes with the audio. Which I hope I straightened out. I cleaned the contacts on my... on my microphone, so I hope that works out. The next video in this series is going to be the PID controller. I watched, God bless YouTube, I watched a guy the other night. I'm not scared of it, other than I don't want to fry it, because we're already dealing with some fried electronics. I looked into Arduino or Raspberry Pi controllers. I don't need that. Yeah, I don't need a Raspberry Pi controller for my kiln. That would be the other option. And yeah, that would be the other option. So I could control ramp speed. I could control, it's called ramping your kiln. So basically what you're doing is you're very carefully controlling the temperature at a certain speed and a rate. I didn't mention it when I was talking about the kiln earlier, but it bears mentioning. The other thing that I need a little bit more precise temperature control with is striking colors. There is a in lamp working, glass working in general, color's kind of important, and there's a lot of colors that require very precise temperature control to produce the proper color, and not just temperature control, but flame characteristics. In my other video, I discussed that. Probably not. I'm not an expert, trust me. I'm probably about the farthest thing from an expert as you could get. Alright, well that kind of burned me a little bit. Wah, wah. So I folded the cut end inside. I don't want any frayed edges. I don't have the proper fiberglass thread to actually do this job. To properly do this job, I should use either fiberglass or Nomex thread. I have neither fiberglass nor Nomex thread. I did have Kevlar thread for a while, but I had nowhere near enough. And I was supposed to do some bulletproof vests, and that project did not come to fruition. If I was going to be doing the vest carriers, I would have probably splurged and bought a spool of black Kevlar thread, which you don't really need, but it would be kind of cool. Okay. All right, I'm going to take a minute and I'm going to set up my sewing machine. Well, I'm going to go into a little bit of a brief sewing tutorial here, which I probably shouldn't need to do but I'm going to do it anyway. You'll notice that I've never sewed this material before, so I needed to adjust my machine. And the last thing I sewed with this was some pretty heavyweight Cordura. This material, while it is heavy, it's got a really, really, really wide, the weave on it's very wide. So I needed to adjust the tension on my sewing machine to get it so it was sewing properly. It wasn't sewing properly, but after 15 minutes of futzing around with it, I futzed with it enough that I can now sew what I want to sew. So I'm gonna put it in the machine here. The other thing is I don't feel like moving my stool over. Standing up while sewing for me is a little difficult. But I'm not set up for sewing out here. The whole reason I'm doing this job out here is because I don't want fiberglass in the house. Okay, so let's do this here. This material really likes to pucker and get out of shape, that's for sure. Do one more all the way down. I'm going to rotate it in the machine here, and then I'm going to do another pass this way, going the right direction. I don't like to run any sewing machine backwards too much. They do run backwards, they're designed to run backwards. You can run a whole stitch backwards. I don't like to do that. Right, I'm going to call that side done for the time being. Fold this out of the way here. Release tension. Yeah, it's not too awful. All I was doing was cutting thread. You didn't miss nothing. Now, getting this to sew somewhat straight is going to be a trick, I can tell already. But it needs to be done. So this is the closed end right here. Okay. So this is the closed end. This is the folded up. This is the closed end. This end is the open end. Okay, so this is... That's a crap shot. So this is the end where it's folded back on itself. This is the end where it's folded back onto itself. This is the more important of the two ends. So what I'm going to do is this is also the adjusting end. So I'm going to sew down both sides the same way I did the front. Careful not to smash my magic clips. Pins would probably be a better option for this. This should be heavily pinned. I didn't pin it because I'm lazy. And it's probably going to come back to bite me in the ass. It's already starting to do. Alright. That actually looks pretty decent so far. Now also you have to keep in mind, I'm not sewing a $20,000 seat for an airplane here. I'm sewing a fiberglass. I'm sewing a fiberglass flap for a 20-year-old kiln. Okay, one more and then we'll be done. I can actually tell, I've used this machine enough to know when the needle's starting to get a little shitty, and quite frankly I can tell just by what I'm doing here that I can actually feel the needle penetrating the fiberglass, which means that the needle already is a little dull and I'm not helping it any. Okay. So what I am doing is I'm reversing my stitch to lock it in, and then I'm flipping it around and doing the same thing. So, all right, now that's going to be that for the time being, I think. So here we go. This is basically exactly what I wanted to do. This is working out so far. It's working out well. I'm curious. I am curious to see how well this thread holds up under heat. I looked up this thread, which I get from Sailrite, and it is rated for some pretty decent temperatures. The front of the kiln right there does get a little warm, but I'm not too worried about it. It would be nice if it didn't melt, but if it does melt, I'm gonna work around that. So this is what I built. This is the flap that's gonna go on the front of the kiln here. So this is how this is gonna go on here, just like that. Actually, I might do it like that up here. So that gives me a flap in the front. I'm going to move that a little bit that way. There's a control box. The control box fits in like that. So now I need to figure out how am I going to attach this to this. And where am I going to put it? So I may actually, ideally, and I may do this too, is I may actually attach it up here. I was originally going to attach it down here, but I think that's too much hanging over. If I do it up here, I'm a little better off. If I fold it in half, which would eliminate the problem of it melting, the thread melting, I think it's going to be too stiff. So that's the other ideal way to do it, is like that. But I'm thinking that's going to be too stiff. I also had kind of wanted to bend it around, but that's going to make it too stiff. Alright, so I'm going to shut the camera off. I'm going to do a little bit of thinking here, and then I'll make a decision.